The first time I saw her, I didn't even know her name. She was behind the counter of a small cafe that sat between the hardware store and the laundromat. A place you went to when you didn't want to run into anyone you knew. I was there because the pipes in my apartment had burst again, and the plumber said he couldn't come until morning. My hair was still damp from the quick shower I'd managed before the water cut off. I ordered an iced Americano. But what I really wanted was to sit somewhere that didn't sound like dripping. She handed me the drink and smiled. Not in a practiced way, but like she was testing if I'd smile back. "You're the guy renting Mrs. Hand's old place, right?" Her voice carried that steady calm that older people sometimes have. "Not old, exactly, just certain." "Yeah," I said, trying to keep the place from falling apart. She laughed softly, the kind of laugh that didn't reach for anything. "My dad used to fix that place all the time. He was the plumber there for years." That's when I noticed the grease under her fingernails. Faint, but there. She must have helped him. "Wes, I've moved into your family's legacy, then," I said. She smiled again, not big, but enough that it stayed in the air between us. I came back the next day, not because I needed coffee. I could have made it at home. But because she'd remembered how I took it: no sugar, extra ice. She didn't ask for my name. She didn't offer hers. We just existed in that thin space between strangers and something slightly more than that. She'd wiped the counter while I sat there pretending to scroll through my phone. Sometimes she'd hum. Nothing recognizable, maybe just to fill the silence. Once, when the AC broke, she was wiping sweat from her forehead with the back of her wrist. Without thinking, I passed her the napkin I'd been folding into smaller and smaller squares. She looked at it, then at me. "You always this polite? Or is it just the heat?" I didn't know what to say. My mouth did that half-smile thing people do when they don't want to admit they care. She took the napkin anyway, and in that simple motion, her fingers brushing mine, I felt something shift. Over the next week, I learned that she always came in early to open, even though the cafe didn't start serving until 8. She liked the quiet, she said. I started showing up around then too, pretending I needed to study before work. We talked in fragments. "How's the plumbing? Still leaking? You should call someone." I might. Sometimes, she'd just sit across the counter from me, elbows on the surface, chin resting in her hands. Not smiling, not frowning, just there. I'd glance at her hands, rougher than I'd expected, small scars along the knuckles, and wonder what it would feel like if she ever touched me on purpose. Once, when she was refilling my glass, a bead of condensation rolled down the side. She caught it with her thumb before it could drip onto the counter. I watched her do it, and she must have noticed because she didn't move her hand away right away. The silence felt heavier after that. That night, back at my place, I scrolled through my messages. My friends had sent memes, voice notes, questions about the weekend. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened a blank text, typed her name, if only I knew it, deleted it. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Hey, this is the plumber's daughter. You still having trouble with your pipes?" I stared at the message for a long time, then smiled quietly, because maybe, just maybe I was. She came by the next morning, toolbox in one hand, coffee cup in the other. I hadn't expected her to actually text back, let alone show up. "Where's the leak?" she asked. Not even saying hello. I pointed to the bathroom. She walked past me, her steps certain, the faint scent of soap and iron following behind her. I stood in the doorway, pretending to be helpful, pretending not to notice how easily she took up space in my quiet apartment. She knelt beside the sink, sleeves rolled up, hair tied loosely. "Whoever installed this didn't know what they were doing," she murmured. I half smiled. "That would be me." She glanced up. The kind of glance that half scolds, half softens. "Then I take it back. You did your best." It was such an ordinary thing to say, but something about the way she said it, low, kind, almost teasing, made me feel seen in a way that caught me off guard. When she finished tightening the pipes, she stayed for tea, said she needed to make sure the seal holds. I didn't argue. We sat on the floor by the slow window, steam curling from our cups. "You live here alone?" she asked. "Yeah, parents moved overseas. It's just me." She nodded, eyes fixed on the mug between her hands. My ex-husband used to say that quiet homes are peaceful. I never agreed. I looked at her, unsure if she wanted me to say something. She didn't. She just sipped her tea and looked out at the street below, where two kids were kicking a can back and forth. There was a softness to her when she wasn't holding herself together. Like she'd stopped bracing for something, just for a second. At one point, she leaned over to check the pipe again, and her shoulder brushed my knee. Neither of us moved. I could hear the slow tick of the kitchen clock. Then she said, quietly, "You should probably find someone your age to talk to. Someone who won't remind you to turn off the faucet." I tried to laugh it off. "You saying I'm too young to deserve plumbing advice?" Something like that. Her smile was tired, the kind that hides more than it reveals. But she didn't move away. After she left, the apartment felt smaller. I noticed the faint ring her teacup had left on the table. For some reason I didn't wipe it off. I sat there, replaying her voice, her laugh, the way her fingers had brushed against mine when she passed me the wrench. I told myself it was nothing, just a shared afternoon. Just gratitude, but the silence around me didn't believe it. Later that night, I found myself writing her name on a scrap of paper. Yuha. She'd mentioned it once, almost in passing, when she laughed about her father naming her after the Milky Way. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. I wrote beneath it. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. I folded the paper and put it in the drawer beside my bed. Then turned off the light, knowing sleep wouldn't come easy. The next week, she stopped coming to the cafe. I waited for 3 mornings. Ordered the same iced Americano, sat at the same stool by the window. Each time, someone else was behind the counter. A younger girl who smiled too quickly, asked if I wanted whipped cream. I didn't. The absence of her voice did something strange to the place. The hum of the espresso machine felt louder, emptier. Even the sunlight through the blinds looked different, thinner, colder. On the 4th morning, I found her outside the hardware store, loading boxes into the back of her small truck. Her sleeves were rolled high, hair tied tighter than usual. "Hey," I said, too quietly. She looked up, smiled faintly. "Hey yourself, pipes holding." "Yeah. Perfect, actually. Good. Then my job's done." She closed the tailgate and brushed her hands together like punctuation. Something in me wanted to ask why she stopped showing up. Instead, I said, "You're still doing the morning shift at the cafe." "Not this week. Helping my dad. He's not feeling well." There was a beat, long, uneven. She didn't offer more, and I didn't push. That evening, she knocked on my door again. Said she needed to check the water pressure. Said it might have been the wrong washer. It was a lie. I could tell by the way she wouldn't meet my eyes. She stood at the sink, twisting the tap back and forth. "Still steady," she said. "Yeah," I murmured. "You didn't need to come for that." "I know." Silence again. The kind that makes you aware of every breath, every small sound. The kettle on the stove ticked as it cooled. "You want tea?" I asked. She hesitated, then nodded. We sat across from each other again, same cups, same small table. Her eyes flicked toward my hands. "You always this quiet?" "Only around people who make me forget what I was going to say." That made her laugh softly. It landed between us and stayed there. She looked out the window for a long time before speaking again. "You know this?" She gestured vaguely between us. "It's probably a bad idea." "Yeah," I said. "Probably." But neither of us moved. The ticking clock filled the space her words left behind. She reached for her cup, and her fingers brushed mine again. Deliberate this time. A pause. Then she drew her hand back slowly, like she was testing her own restraint. I almost said something, "Stay," or "Don't pretend this is nothing." Instead, I said, "Tea's getting cold." "Yeah," she whispered, eyes still on mine. "That happens." A knock on the door startled us both. My friend Jun. His voice muffled through the wood. "Yo, you home?" Yunha stood quickly, smoothing her hair. "I should go." I opened the door view, pretending to tie my shoe. When I looked back, she was gone. Only the half-empty cup on the table remained. I stared at the rim, where her lipstick left the faintest trace of color, and for a second, just a second, I imagined leaning forward and tasting it. But I didn't. It rained lightly that evening. The kind of drizzle that makes the street smell like wet asphalt and old wood. Yunho and I walked side by side, jackets damp, past the row of closed shops. I kept my hands shoved deep in my pockets, mostly to stop them from brushing against hers. "You've been quiet lately," she said, glancing at me out of the corner of her eye. "I haven't felt like talking," I said. My voice was lower than usual, hesitant. Her silence followed me, steady. It made my chest tight. We stopped at a bench under a flickering street lamp. She pulled her coat tighter around her. I wanted to offer mine, but something held me back. The weight of our difference, the years, the quiet warning I couldn't name. "I saw someone at the cafe today," she said finally. "Oh, yes, a guy my age. He asked me to help him with his plumbing issues." I laughed. He didn't get it. I laughed too, nervously, more to fill the air than anything else. But inside, a strange heat rose, not anger, not exactly jealousy. More like a sharp awareness that maybe she could exist in the world without me noticing. "I don't know why," I said, almost to myself, "but I thought, maybe I'd care more than I should." She tilted her head, studying me. "Care? About what?" I swallowed. My words stumbled. "About you, about this." My hand hovered near hers on the bench, then dropped. "Even if it's wrong," her eyes softened, but there was something fragile there, like she could shatter with a single word. "I think about it too," she admitted after a pause. Her voice was small, like she was testing the sound of it. "Even if I shouldn't." We didn't move closer, didn't reach for each other. But the space between us hummed with the possibility of crossing lines neither of us had planned to approach. I noticed the raindrops clinging to the edges of her hair. My eyes traced the curve of her jaw, the way her coat fell against her shoulder. And I realized I'd imagined this, a touch, a confession, a moment of reckoning, far too many times already. "I keep thinking," I said, my words breaking into a whisper. "What if I ruined it before it even started?" Her fingers twitched in her lap. She didn't answer, not with words. Just a long, careful blink. We stayed like that for a while, letting the rain fill the spaces our words couldn't reach. The bench creaked beneath us, the street lamp flickered again, the distant hum of a car passing. Finally, she shifted her gaze to the wet pavement. "Maybe we shouldn't." Her voice trailed off, and suddenly, I realized we were teetering at the edge of something that couldn't be undone. I wanted to ask her, "Do you want this too?" But instead, I only let my heart beat in silence beside hers. The next morning, the cafe smelled like burnt coffee and wet newspapers. Yuna wasn't there. I waited until mid-morning, watching the door swing open for every customer except her. A man in a worn leather jacket took her usual spot behind the counter. I didn't even order coffee. Just sat, hands wrapped around an empty mug, tracing the rim with my thumb. I texted her later. "Hey, everything okay?" No reply. That evening, I went to the hardware store under the pretense of needing a wrench. She wasn't behind the counter, her father was. "Oh, you're looking for Yina?" he asked, surprised. "She's busy. Family stuff." I nodded, though I didn't know what that meant. My chest tightened in the way it does when someone vanishes without explanation. On the walk home, I imagined her apartment, her kitchen, her hands making tea for herself. I imagined the half-smile she would have given me, the soft voice saying something ordinary that would have stopped me mid-thought. For the next few days, I avoided the cafe, avoiding the possibility of seeing her, or not seeing her. My phone remained on my desk, buzzing with messages from friends I didn't reply to. I thought about texting her again, then stopped. Her absence left a hollow rhythm. The air in my apartment seemed heavier. The water in the sink ran slower. I caught myself rehearsing what I would say if I saw her again. Careful, casual, unknowing. But every rehearsal ended with my hand hovering over the doorknob, unsure whether to knock. Then, a message came, from a number I didn't recognize. "Hey, it's complicated, sorry." I stared at it for a long time, thumb hovering. Complicated how? Family, work, her past. I wanted to call, ask, demand, beg even, but the words wouldn't form. Instead, I left it open that night. I sat by the window with the kettle beside me, half-drained cup of tea. My mind looped back to the bench in the rain, the almost confession, her fingers brushing mine. I felt that warmth again, the one that came with possibility, then lost it instantly. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. I imagined her walking past the cafe window, The empty chair where she should have been behind the counter, the door I hadn't knocked on. All the spaces she used to fill still existed. But now they felt like traces, not presence. I pulled my phone toward me again. The message from her sat unread. I didn't delete it. I didn't reply. I didn't move. The kettle hissed faintly. The clock ticked. And somewhere, I knew she was thinking about me, too. Somewhere, her hand brushed the same counter, her eyes flicked to the same empty street. But we were both paused. I found her at the cafe the morning after the rain had stopped. She was wiping down tables, sleeves rolled high, hair tucked behind one ear. She didn't see me right away. I hovered by the door, my hands in my pockets, trying to decide if I should leave or step forward. She looked up, our eyes met. That familiar flicker passed between us, quiet, careful, tentative. "I didn't expect to see you," she said softly, voice low enough that only I could hear. "Thought I should," I said. My words felt heavier than I wanted them to. She nodded. "Yeah, maybe." We sat at the small table by the window. Steam rose from our cups in lazy spirals. Neither of us spoke at first. The cafe around us hummed with low conversation and the clatter of dishes, but we existed in our own bubble. "I didn't mean to vanish," she said finally, fingers tracing the edge of her mug. "It just got messy. Family stuff, old habits." I get it. I miss this," I said, indicating nothing and everything at once. Her eyes softened. She let herself exhale a tiny thing, almost imperceptible. "I missed it too, even if I didn't know I would." We talked, carefully. Not about what could or could happen, not about rules or the years between us. Just small things. A new coffee blend, a repair in my apartment, a joke she'd remembered from last week. But everything felt layered, each small comment, each glance carrying more weight than it should. At one point, her hand brushed mine as she passed me the sugar. I didn't pull away, neither did she. The pause stretched long. I wanted to say everything. The almost confessions, the stolen glances, the quiet obsession of days spent thinking about her. But I only whispered, "I'm glad you're here." Her lips quirked into the smallest smile, and her thumb brushed the back of my hand. "Okay," she said. Simple, human, enough. I realized then that the sitting together, the quiet acknowledgement, the shared space without expectation, was everything we could safely have. Not a declaration, not a promise, but real and fragile. She stood to leave, coat over her shoulders. I didn't follow. I didn't call her back, I just watched. She paused at the door, looked at me, smiled again, faint but steady. "See you tomorrow." I nodded. "Yeah." And then she was gone, leaving me with the memory of warmth, the faint scent of soap and rain, and the quiet certainty that nothing needed to be fixed to feel whole. It was 8:47 a.m., the sunlight spilling across the cafe floor in narrow stripes through the blinds. Yunha was behind the counter again, wiping down the same tables she had years ago. Sleeves rolled high, hair tucked loose behind her ears. She looked up and caught my eye. No words were needed. I ordered my usual black coffee, no sugar, extra ice, and she remembered without asking. The quiet acknowledgement between us felt heavier than anything shouted. Weeks had passed. Pipes no longer leaked. Rain no longer made the streets smell of old asphalt. Life had its usual rhythms, small but steady. I showed up for morning coffee, she showed up to open the cafe, and we found each other in the spaces in between. At the counter, in the narrow alley when she delivered a package, leaning across the kitchen sink when she checked a faucet. There was no grand declaration, no sudden gestures, just presence, shared silences, fingers brushing on accident or intent, teacups left steaming on the table while we talked about trivial things. One afternoon I noticed a spot on the floor where her teacup had left a faint ring. I smiled, half to myself, half at the thought of her noticing the same detail, and didn't wipe it. The bench by the park, the same one under the flickering street lamp, became ours again. We sat there sometimes after work, legs dangling, letting the quiet stretch comfortably between us. Rain or shine, it didn't matter. The clock ticked, the world moved on, we stayed. She leaned against me once, just lightly, while we shared a thermos of tea she'd brought from the cafe. My hand brushed hers. We didn't speak, we didn't need to. I realized that love, if it could be called that, wasn't about grand gestures or perfect timing. It was about noticing the details, the way her lips curved while sipping tea, the careful way she carried herself, The unspoken trust in letting someone sit beside you in silence. Evenings still brought the sound of water dripping somewhere, but now it was a comfort, not a nuisance. The small apartment felt warmer. The empty spaces were shared, and the pauses, the quiet, reflective pauses, became part of the rhythm. I think back sometimes to the first day she handed me that napkin. To the morning she showed up in the rain. To the bench where we almost said everything we hadn't. And I understand now. It wasn't about rushing, or confessing, or fixing everything at once. It was about staying, about presence, about the slow accumulation of care. Yunha caught my eye across the cafe, gave me that tiny, steady smile, and I knew that this careful, quiet companionship was enough, more than enough, and in that knowledge, I finally felt at ease. The story ends not with fireworks, but with the soft sound of tea being poured, a hand brushing mine, and the understanding that some love doesn't need to be announced. It simply grows, quietly, perfectly, between two people who notice each other.